Okay, I don't know who's been clicking like and subscribing, but you guys don't need to, there's no need to like or make comments or subscribe to these videos if you stumble upon them. These are just intended to be put online for my college English classes. This one is continuing a video chat on folk and popular culture. I want to talk just a little bit more for the online students or those who missed the activity about folklore. And there are professors who've made their career studying folklore academically, and you can go take a college class in an English department on folklore, and you get into very technical definitions, but basically they would somehow break down the term into folk and what it means to be part of a people group, and what exactly lore means. And usually folklorists will look at all kinds of things, magic tricks, riddles, puzzles, superstitions, jokes, all kinds of customs, and if there's a ritual to tying a shoelace that's not just personal to one baseball player but shared by a people group, usually values with some ritual or phenomenon, beliefs, and all kinds of things, ghost stories, things done around the campfire that are passed along person to person or in a region, cautionary tales, whether told by firefighters or about a haunted house or all kinds of things. Stories of ESP and water witching pendulums that can tell if a child's going to be born a boy or a girl, Christmas traditions, lucky numbers, and all kinds of things. Crafts like quilting and glass blowing, especially done by hand or that are taught from person to person, would be included as folklore. So it's not just fairy tales or folk stories that are passed along, but all kinds of things. One example in the textbook is the phenomenon of witch writing, which from a scientific perspective might be called sleep paralysis, but from a regional or folk culture perspective is attended by supernatural stories of a witch coming and riding people in the night. They can't move, and maybe can be warded off by a prayer or returning to confession. So this strange phenomenon that's reported seems tied in with values or beliefs of a people group or a folk culture. Now, folk culture, I'll just pause to distinguish folk culture from our normal use of culture. Originally culture meant that kind of high, refined culture that represented the highest aspirations or ideals of maybe a nation or humanity, human nature. But more recently by anthropologists has come to be studied as all kinds of human expression in societies. And so the idea of culture has changed in that we talk about corporate cultures in which IBM employees, at least they used to wear three-piece suits, but maybe in Apple Computer Company, they wear jeans and t-shirts. So we get ideas of corporate cultures, national cultures, and things like that. So the folk cultures would probably apply to a local area, an ethnic group, a people group, or region. And so the folklore itself is what I want to go into a little more detail about. Now, one kind of folklore that's been studied in recent decades, I'll say, are the urban legends. And these are things that kind of modern folklore that not only things that have been passed on from antiquity are studied by folklorists, but also things that arise in cities and modern society. And the some of the first books published in this field, and there's been a popular movie made, and you can find websites on the internet now. It's been popularized, but back before it had become quite so popularized and widespread, there were some books written. The first was called The Vanishing Hitchhiker, and it was a story set in a more rural location in which a driver picked up a young girl in distress in a nightgown and, following her instructions, took her home from the highway along county roads up a dirt road to a farmhouse. Upon encountering an older couple who said their daughter had died years ago in a roadside accident, the protagonist turns and sees there's no one in the car, and the older couple says, yes, this happens every year about this time, as the ghost of the daughter tries to make her way back home. And this is an example of urban legend that showed up in various permutations in lots of places. One from the local area in Athens near our college is the story of the wedding cake house. And from time to time you'll see a story appear in the University of Georgia student newspaper about this. But on the corner of Millage Avenue and Baxter Street, there's a sorority house that is white and has stories stacked, looks something like a wedding cake. But the story gets passed along that years ago that house was made for the daughter of a wealthy couple, and the groom never showed up, and the despondent daughter went to an upper room and hung herself. And there's a superstition or saying among the current sorority girls that whatever girl gets that room is married within a year of graduation. And so I don't know how well documented that is, but that's a story with a superstition, and what values or beliefs may be tied to that, I'll let you be the judge. Some superstitions vary from culture to culture. For example, in America, if I ask my students, tell me a lucky number, usually they'll say 7, lucky 7. In China, when I taught English in China, the students would say 8 is the lucky number. The unlucky number in America, of course, 13. And in China, the unlucky number is always 4. Dare I say it? It's America, it's okay. But it would not be almost spoken out loud in China because the number sut sounds like the word for death. And so anything involving 4 would be unlucky in that culture. So these are some examples of folklore, and I just want to close with the thought that while both popular and culture have purposes, we might look for special significance, or different, maybe I should say different meaning and purposes in folk culture if we designate it as a different kind of culture. And so I mentioned in the previous video chat that the folk culture involves person-to-person sharing, tradition, involving communities or families or regions. But what purposes can we find? And with the example of witch writing, at least for the older generation, there was a moral lesson to say your prayers, to not leave off confession. And so it became a cautionary phenomenon. Now, as that got passed on, if you'll read the closing paragraph of that essay, the phenomenon was losing its moral force. And so for the younger generation, it was just something strange or weird that happened. And with the older generation, it carried along a more spiritual meaning for them. Some other purposes mentioned in Bell Hook's essay, Piecing It Together, that focused on quilting, but could be applied to other folklore, especially folk art, were that the quilting or the practices were good for community or brought people together. The quilts were a memory or a piece of nostalgia, connecting people to the past or bonding to the older generation. Bell Hooks mentioned the universal experience of awe and wonder that attends the creation of art. So she considered folklore art, although she called it a democratic expression, and that could be shared by all people, regardless of wealth or class. She mentioned social issues being expressed, such as feminism, as the women gained a voice through the quilting. Harriet Powers sharing Bible stories, and others sharing pieces of history, stories of family vacations, and another quilt documented in the textbook. Another one, and some of this bordered on spirituality, some of the things Bell Hooks writes about the expression of art and these things. One not to overlook is the practical everyday use. There's a short story called Everyday Use by Alice Walker. Some students will be familiar with, in which there's a conflict between trying to make the quilt, the family quilt, into a cultural expression or ethnic expression by one sister who said the other sister who stayed at home would just make practical or everyday use of the quilt. And so that tension is well expressed in the short story, but some quilters who just piece together old cloth to keep the children warm, wouldn't cut smaller artful squares and piece them together so much. The bigger the better. They just piece the clothing together for the babies and make blankets from them. So there is the practical use of the folk art and the folk culture. But also some women mentioned self-improvement, peace of mind, and some kind of almost therapy or escape as they use their imaginations and use their skills in the folk art. So these are some of the possible purposes, meanings, or significance. I'm sure I've barely brushed the surface, but it's food for thought, and to get you going in the right direction and introduced to this topic. So I hope this little discussion helps you with your assignments, and good luck with them. Thank you.